So we all went to school and learned how to work things out through analysing. And that keeps us pretty much locked in thinking, which keeps us away from reality, because thinking's not real, it's dream. The sage doesn't get involved in that kind of operation. There's an interest in what's called inner knowing. And inner knowing is there, but it doesn't have words. It just knows which way to go. And so the sage stays silent and waits for the inner knowing. This inner knowing is so quiet. It never tries to convince of anything. It's never pushy in any way, shape or form. But what happens, people get a little impatient, so they go to the analysing mind and try to work things out logically. And that keeps you trapped in a kind of a loop of what you already know to some degree. Alexander Bell and some of the great inventors, Tesla, talked about the answers, the inventions coming from the nothingness, coming from out of the blue. And this is the inner knowing. The answers appear in a form of knowing. And so as you become willing to become quieter, you can tune into this inner knowing, which isn't instinct. It's not gut feeling. That's a little different again. That's more to do with the animal. Inner knowing isn't a part of the survival mechanism. It's something a little higher. And so, if a decision needs to be made, silence is required. Not analysing, which is actually noisy, but silence. And in that silence comes the answer, comes the inner knowing. And so the sage and the shaman both operate on the inner knowing, becoming silent, becoming still, and the answers come. This is a very different way of living in the world. This is a very beautiful way of living in the world, because you're actually not living in your head. You're not living in analysing, in trying to work out problems. You're with reality. You're with what's real. People get a little impatient though. They want to push it, because sometimes there's no answer. Sometimes there isn't anything going on. It's just silent. And so nothing happens. I think it was about 35 years ago I started listening to the inner knowing instead of listening to my analysing mind. It's a very different way of living. Kind of in a way it's in tune with the way of the heart rather than the way of the mind, which tends to be survival. And I say that because quite often it can be inconvenient. As the way of the heart is inconvenient. But it is a beautiful way to live. I've been inviting people now for a long time to come and join me in the silence, to come and join me in the stillness, in the beauty. But it's hard because you have to leave the noisy one behind. You have to leave the analyzer behind, the dreamer behind, the projector behind, the one that you've become accustomed to, which you didn't have until you were around about 4 or 5 when you started developing it. Up until then, you lived pretty much in reality, in the moment. And then this dream machine developed itself around an identity called I. And so meditation and mindfulness basically are methodologies to reclaim reality from the dream that most adults tend to be lost in. A dream that is usually problematic because we spent 12 years at school, a lot of us, learning how to solve problems. So solving problems became very much a default pattern. People live in their heads, solving problems. There's a kind of a reward for that. But the silence is so beautiful. The stillness is so beautiful. Reality is so beautiful. The thing is, though, the dream is not going to go away by itself. If it's a default pattern now, it takes practice. Practice of being aware of what is real, which is meditation. The only thing not being real is what you think. The practice of mindfulness, being aware of what's real in motion, rather than what you think. In this way, you reclaim reality. If there isn't any practice, well, it's not going to change much. The default patterns tend to run until people die. So long I've been inviting people to join me in the silence. But people want to tell me their story. I lost interest in my own story so long ago, when I realized that the story of you is really not that pleasant when you sit back and really analyze it. It tends to be problematic. It tends to be full of desires, hopes, which, if you look at closely, are forms of suffering, because wanting something you haven't got is not satisfying, it's discontentment. Being able to be with the silence and the stillness is contentment. It's very beautiful.